dry down to 1/3 the weight wet to sell, so there's $2 or $3 worth of ginseng right there in that one plant. So you can see that ginseng was a pretty profitable crop. I'm going to talk a little bit about photographs. In history, we use photographs all the time. We use postcards mostly, but our early photographs were mostly portraits of people, and maybe you've actually seen a photo where they strap the person in position so they can't move because you actually had to sit there for 5 seconds to have your photo captured. And that was the 1860s to 1880s. Postcards came along, photography got better, you could snap a picture quicker. And photographers, since they weren't doing as many portraits, were running around the countryside taking pictures. The thing that I really liked was air photos. These portrait guys, when they got done making postcards and we got airplanes available, they started jumping up in airplanes and taking pictures around the country. Onondaga County has a wealth of photos available if you can get your hands on them. Syracuse University had an airplane and they were flying around shooting whatever they wanted to shoot. The librarians at Syracuse University tell me that they mainly have shot their own property, but Syracuse University was involved in creating Highland Park, reforestation, and they most likely shot all that land up there, and in the Syracuse archives is probably very beautiful shots of Highland Park with the farmsteads in there. I haven't been able to find my way through the librarians to find somebody that would say, here's a pile of negatives, go to work. So, Chuck, maybe with your deep ties to Syracuse University, with Al Francis' interest in Highland Park, we could let...
There's a fella in our church, Morris Alexander, Dr. Morris Alexander. He helped set up Labrador Hollow Unique Area. And if there's anything available up there, he will know about it.
Because the librarians are really good at saying, I'm sure there's nothing there that you'd be interested in. You know, instead of saying, gee, let me look for you. So there's a piece of our history. C.S. Robinson flew Onondaga County in 1936 and did beautiful aerial shots of everything. And we have this complete collection. All the Fabius, all the Highland Park, shows all the farmsteads. We were able to get the original photographs and copy those. And there's detail better than this. This is a shot of the village. This isn't Robinson's. This came out of the newspaper, but it shows you the details, building by building, how the land was used. This is our centralized school just built. It's 2 years old. You can see everybody's lot out behind the houses. And that's the kind of stuff that the aerial photography has in it. And when you're working with the original photographs, you can zoom in on a single house and you can actually count the clapboards on the house. There's that much information available. Then came the entrepreneurs, the guys who just flew these airplanes, went around shooting shots like this, hoping to knock on the door and sell that to a rich farmer or a big homeowner. And Mason's Flying Service was one of our earlier ones. I've been trying to track these people down. The best I could find was Hank Mason crashed in an airplane in the 50s taking photographs. But I can't find anybody who has his negatives. We did find a fellow who was 14 years old and he flew in a plane with Hank from Geneva to Buffalo, and he was allowed to pilot the plane so Hank Mason could take pictures all the way to Buffalo. Hopefully, it wasn't a 14-year-old boy he crashed with. I haven't been able to search the Elmira papers where he was buried to find out what the story was. But you can see this is the Esty farm and the quality of his photography.
Tell it.
Okay.
So what I'm getting to the audience, I'm trying to ask everybody who, every time you see an old aerial photograph like that, you need to flip it over. On the back of it is the key to the records. Here it says roll 11B, shot 3154. If we had Mason's negatives, we could find that roll, and when these guys were up in the air, they went up and down the street and they shot everybody's home. So we would capture quite a piece of our history. Number one, in the Mason case, if we could find the negatives. but the more of these photos we flip over. So if anybody has any old photos, look on the back. No, I use the Geneva Historical Society.
Because the experience station has tons of old stuff from all the agricultural stuff and everything. And I don't know if they still got it, but they used to have it all swirled away.
We're recording all the comments today on the cameras, so I don't have to take any notes. Good idea, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend that works in there.
Okay. Super. The next character who was out making millions taking photographs was a Henry DeWolf. And he claims to have been involved in 1927. Now that's really early. But talking to Henry's daughter, he was a route salesman. He was peddling the photograph, he wasn't the photographer. He didn't own the company until 1940. When World War II started, the government confiscated his negatives and his cameras and put them out of business. Because of all this valuable information he could have, the Japanese could come and get it. So he had to go work on a farm as a farm laborer, but got his equipment back and went back into business. 87 was his death, and ended the company, although his daughter Joyce owns the 2 million negatives and still prints off pictures for people as long as you happen to know the numbers. Now she just lives in a house with a basement full of 2 million negatives. To give you an idea, 2 million negatives would just about fill this room floor to ceiling. They're on rolls of 500, and the rolls are 100 foot long, 500 pictures per roll. Unfortunately, she didn't. No, just her basement. Unfortunately, she doesn't have an indexing system. So if you said, "Do you have a picture of my house?" She said, "Yeah, I probably have 5 of them," but there's no way to find them. But let's talk a little bit more. There's a Fabius connection with the DeWolf family. Joyce's daughter Joan married a Bobette. And the Bobettes are interested in getting into this inventory. So the key to finding the rolls of negatives are flipping those pictures over and coming up with the numbers. Every time you find a photo number, it tells us what roll we are. We know which one to pull out of her basement and look at. Sandy the other day came up with some photos that were donated, and now we have 80 photos from Roy Dodger's farm on the James Computer Road coming to Fabius. So there's at least 80 photographs along that route that we can harvest. It's taken me a year and a half to get her to be willing to allow me to look at anything, and she hasn't yet come up with the roll for me to look at. But she doesn't hang up the phone on me anymore. Thanks to her daughter.
You probably don't use your right name anymore.
And we happen to have Mark Harper, a local resident, lives in Pompey, been in the business of photography since 1978 on his own, but he started working for Henry DeWolf in 1972, selling photos. Realized that there was money to be made being a photographer as opposed to being just a route salesman. So he went into his business, and he had a collection of over 200,000 negatives. I asked him 3 times this week to take a picture of his inventory so I could get you guys to understand what it's like and why you shouldn't call him to say, "Do you have a picture of my house?" He has one bay in his garage full floor to ceiling with his negatives. Good indexing system, but the indexing system just says, "I was on Route 80 today." So he might have been from Tellington to Woodstock. But Mark is very interested in working with us and is willing to loan out all his negatives to allow us to make copies of them. And what we can do is index the number on the back of the photo with the photo, keep them on a book, so if somebody ever wants that picture, they can call Mark and say, "Roll number 2, picture number 87, please, I'd like a copy." So it's a tool for him to be able to sell. Because, back in 1978 when he took this picture, the chance of ever selling that to anybody again is probably non-existent.
What are we looking at?
Can anybody guess this shot here?
That's Woodford
It's a nice
Brothers.
Fabius shop.
That's Woodford Brothers, isn't it? Down the old creamery?
Mike says it's the Woodford Brothers at Creamery.
Yep, that's what it is. This is the creamery here, this is the cabbage house. Back of the
We're in a
Julian
train
Methodist
station.
Church?
Yeah, this is the railroad track.
Okay, and there's the
Train depot.
Anytime been down there.
Now, Mark wasn't a Pompey resident when he took this, and he was laughing about, I was just out in the country and I was just snapping pictures, not realizing that he's gonna someday live in the area. And this is just some other shots that he let me take. I don't know if anybody wants to guess where we are. This is Ed Lutzinger's farm. Ronnie Lutzinger's farm. The Bush farm along James Ophelia Road. The old Alcott farm. Humsinger's,
Hunsinger Kennel, that's from.
now owned by Lutzinger's. Pompey School.
That was the Stephen Shea farm too.
Stephen Shea.
Pompey Hill.
Thank you, Pompey Hill School. And Turner's, Hunsinger's farm here.
Seal and Case.
And the Huff Tail
Yeah.
too.
So, this is just an inventory. Mark is very workable with us, but we have to agree that we're not in the business of reproducing these and selling them. That's his business. Ours is just for the historical perspective of holding on to these. So, I've been after these aerial photographs probably for 5 years. I've been working on this project. So, if anybody sees a picture, flip it over.
Oh, good.
Yeah. This is some of Mark's work. This is my family homestead. And, he's all the way up to roll 194. Each roll's got 500 pictures on it. Back to what I was supposed to be talking about. School. It's hard for us to be able to go back in Fabius and say, education started at a certain date because we lack records. And we'll talk a little bit more about why in just a minute, but if you go back to 1784, this is what our counties looked at. Revolutionary War was just over. New York State was a little unsettled. Massachusetts was still claiming Western New York. And you can see they were claiming, Massachusetts also claimed way over here and Connecticut. So things were a little unsettled. Nobody was living in Fabius at that time. By 1790, we were talking about the military track. In a minute, we're going to see that it's mapped out. But we are thinking about education at this point. This is the military track, and this chunk right here was 1.2 million acres that went to the Revolutionary War soldiers for serving for New York State. Each one of these little blocks that you see here, this is Fabius, was actually surveyed, and surveyors went out there, marked the corners of those 600 acres. Pretty impressive. And if we only had an aerial photograph back in 1790, it would be great, but these surveyors kept record books and they noted all kinds of things, types of trees, sizes of trees, amount of lakes and water.
What years did they survey?
Surveys took place from 1787 to 1790. And there were like 15 or 16 different surveyors. Fabius Military Township started out as 100 lots. Reduced when Portland County was created. Bruce is, of course, the publication that we always use for good, reliable information. Here he lists all the soldiers that were given those 50 lots. And the reason we're talking about this is back in the 1780s, New York State is setting this program up and they're reserving land for gospel and school way back at this time. So they're thinking about our education system and how it's going to work. In town of Fabius, lots number 3, 36, 41, and 44 were reserved. That means they weren't given to a soldier. They were reserved and sold, and that money went into a fund to take care of the schools, to pay for some of the costs, and the churches. Joanne and I have a constant argument going on about, did those soldiers ever really settle here? And for her benefit, here's the names of the people that were Revolutionary soldiers that did settle here, and they aren't the same as the other guys. That'll be a future newsletter article. I'll win on that one. 1825, New York State required every town to submit a map of what their town looked like. Somewhere in the New York archives would be a map drawn by whoever our map maker was in Fabius that Burr was given to make this 1829 map. No schools are shown on this map, so we don't know where our schoolhouses are in 1829. Of course, we're reserving these lots. Now, when I studied under Mrs. Cox, New York State history in 7th grade, we learned about lots reserved for school and gospel. And I thought to myself, awful strange that they would know where we wanted our churches and our schools. She never explained to us it was the sale of these lots that was going to fund the education. And of course, I guess I should have known that. But I just thought, boy, the surveyors, how in the world could they tell where we're going to build our schools and our churches? But, and you look at these locations, and they're probably not where you want a school. Okay, first indication of how many schools we have in Fabius is the 1845 census conducted by New York State, not the federal New York State census, but the ones conducted by New York State. For some reason, 55, 65, and 75 census, they don't ever ask about schools anymore. We're talking 20 schools already at that time. Whenever we're working on a project in history, we're talking about records. And proper storage of records is critical.
That was good.
Fabius has a long history of not taking care of records. 1880s, the Bramer hardware fire burned everything of our records 1850 and earlier. We're looking at the village of Fabius storage of records. This photo was taken last Sunday.
That's great.
We're looking at the town of Fabius record storage system.
Last Sunday.
Last Sunday.
That's the
That
furnace
looks
room.
like that today.
That's the furnace room, by the way,
This is also with oil storage.
under the kitchen.
And let's note that this is an improvement over what we had previous. We do have a locked record storage area here, and we do have a pile of boxes to use to put our records in. It's just that it hasn't all happened yet. Unfortunately, our storage area is under the kitchen sink also. So things aren't perfect.
It's under what?
The kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Okay. In our newsletter, we always have this little phrase of don't throw it away. The Historical Society could use it. Our record isn't perfect either with record storage. We don't have a policy on how to keep records. Lily,
We're working on
He's
it.
working.
Yeah.
Lily is, at our next executive meeting in April, we're going to hammer. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so since we have 4 records, we need to go to the maps. The Fagan 52 shows 15 schools and 6021 and on and on. So let's take a look. We use the Sweets 1874 map to locate the one-room schoolhouses. The logic in where schools are built, there's no rhyme or reason. Sylvia Shoebridge once told us that a good, hardy American student shouldn't have to walk more than a mile to school each way. A little different than our programs today. Each one of these yellow boxes indicate, or green boxes indicates a school. We're going to take a look at each one of those schools. This is the French school. With students, you can see we've got a little deterioration on the school building.
Where is this?
This is the James Appilia Road.
The corner of Daly Road.
And that would be this one here.
Why is it called French?
Because the Billy Garrett's house was where the Frenches lived.
Ah,
Okay. The French family farmed in the area. They were predominant people. Each one of these little rooms of the house had their own school board. Usually it was 2 or 3 people. Usually was the largest landowner was the guy in charge of making the decisions. We need to talk a little bit about how we finance schools. Up until 1850, we didn't have the free school program, which meant that your parents had to pay for the cost of putting your kid to school. And they actually paid the teacher's salary and came up with the firewood and all the little things you needed to run your school. The town did kick in some money, but school was no longer free at that time. It was not free. New York State had attempted a number of times to institute a free school law. 1820 was a big fight. It did come along in 1850. And what free school meant was the parents no longer had to pay for their kids, but everybody paid for it in property taxes. So it wasn't really free, it's just that it was free to the parents at that point, other than they paid property taxes too. So prior to 1850, if you had 10 kids, it would cost you quite a bit to send your kids to school. We'll just click through some of the French kids. This is the dates you can see there. Some people are real nice and they label the pictures for us. You can see behind them the school was not too good a shape. This is the Lower Berwyn School.
That's across from Dick Woodford's house.
Differentiating that from the Pondy School known as Upper Berwyn to us, probably just to the Berwyn School.
And those kids are barefoot.
This was in the one down in Woodford,
Yeah.
across the road from Woodford.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on that map, but sure.
Yeah. And this is the same school. Everybody's pretty well dressed up in that photo, so it must be they knew ahead of time. And this photo, you got everybody identified. 1913, same school. You can see out in the background, the fields how they're cleared. I went back and viewed this same site, and you can't see anything across the valley now. It's all wooded. It really has changed.
What does the sign say in front?
They made a sign of some kind.
It says Berwyn
Oh,
School,
rooms.
May 29th. So they're still in school in May.
Are any of these buildings still in existence?
No.
This one isn't, and Fred. Now, our photographer here was Hector Woodford. We've seen his pictures show up a couple times before, and that's a relative of Dick Woodford's. Clark Hollow had their own school, and we can't find any evidence of the building, any photos. There was a peak well that we hoped the Historical Society was going to inherit. Off to Apulia, which is different than the school in Apulia Station. This happened to be my father here. We always kidded him that he had a hole in his pants and he looked like he had missed a few meals.
So what's the date?
This is the identification from 1920. And that's quite a fancy looking schoolhouse compared to others. Looks kind of like a church.
Was it 2 stories?
Yep.
And this is an older building? Yes.
All the attendees are identified. Another picture of the game. If anybody wants me to stop and go into any more detail on this, please. If not, we're just going
You
to.
think those doors were boy entrance, girl entrance?
Probably.
Yeah, they talked about it, that when I did some research.
Never understood exactly why that was so important to enter.
They sat in the same classroom, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They hung their clothes or whatever.
But the church, early churches were like that.
Although
too.
sometimes they didn't sit at the same size depending upon, yeah, I mean, they didn't mix them up, boys sat one side.
Charlie, what would the little door in the front be for?
Wow.
Do you know?
This is the little right there.
Yeah.
Little buildings in the front. Wood.
Probably, that's what I would guess, to put wood down in the basement for the, because that had a basement.
He said it might be to throw wood in.
That's what I would guess.
Is that down, that's not around?
No,
No.
it's gone now.
That's,
That went to become this chicken house. This
Right.
Oh, I spent a lot of hours cleaning that building.
It looks quite a bit different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Added windows.
Then on to the police station.
pretty. Is that around?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
right on the.
just
Road.
beyond the,
Oh,
just before the firehouse.
Oh, great.
On the van towards Chile.
Wow, that's pretty.
Casting Road.
This was talked about as a two-room schoolhouse. Very important to distinguish that differently than other schools. Lots of students. Now, this is in the town of Fabius. Now, these students in this area go to Tully. And when we got into centralization, the school districts had a choice of who they wanted to join with.
There's a little boy in the center there, I think it was another school picture. Look at that. He's got a rip right up the middle. You look like one standing next to your dad.
Look at this. Garden right here.
He enjoyed it.
There was a disabled boy that went to school, and they showed him in another picture, in a wheeled cart, and they bring him into the picture in the cart. So that might be him. I always thought that these were ears that this girl was wearing right here. Maybe the teachers.
It was a boy's shirt.
The teachers.
Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, yeah. Boy, it's a little peculiar.
See Bob Fairchild?
Fairchild.
Now, even though this school centralized and went with
They just
Tully,
get his glass.
it still maintained its operation until early 50s.
It was like Death Falls.
Markham Hollow School was just a small schoolhouse right on the border between Tully and Fabius. On the evening of the vote on the centralization of the Tully school system, they voted to centralize with Tully. Last minute decision. And this is the inside.
That showed the blackboard. The actual boards came black in that picture.
Which is this area here. So, more one-room schoolhouses down, what we call Bleasonville after Mike's family, the largest residence down here. This, I don't know where the people came to go to the Labrador School, because now almost nobody lives down in that part of the country.
No, there's nobody from the gravel bed
They're from up
all the way down to Frickin' Truck.
here. Yeah.
Shanklin.
But apparently, in the 1852 map, this school shows, and there must have been enough people to populate the school. Number 5, across the street from Chuck Boucher's house. We're going to see later on in this sign, we have no pictures of that. There was a schoolhouse there. There was one located on Hurley Road, and one called the Rowley School. And we have no records. Now, when we talk about records, each one of these schoolhouses kept detailed reading notes of the board, who their teachers were, who their students were, and those were all nice bound little books, and they didn't seem to survive. When our school purged its records and modernized it, they don't seem to have surfaced. Charlie Shea told us one time he saw them, so we knew they existed. But into the heart of the village of Fabius, we're showing 3 schools. Just a different map.
Could you snap that
Sure.
last one back for just a second?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, all right, okay, go ahead.
Now, Charlie, if you can add anything in here, please do.
All right.
Okay.
What was the select school? You know about that?
Can anybody fill us in? Joanne, do you know?
That was, Julia Colville School was behind the hardware store, Charlie? Is that
No,
true?
it's right up on the street, as I understand it.
But it was in that area of the hardware store, right?
It was right in the west of the hardwood.
Okay.
And they do anything?
Julia Colville was related to Moses.
And did she teach something special? Was she a finishing school or?
No, I think, no, it wasn't a finishing school. It was, I don't know exactly what she
The
taught.
name is pretty impressive, you know, like,
Select.
why go to the union school when you go to the select
Yeah.
schools?
the nursery school was somewhere near Mrs. Thompson's house, wasn't it, Charlie? The nursery school? Was-
What was your question?
The nursery school was somewhere near the Thompson's house.
Just had to stand up.
Oh, that's okay.
You go back one.
Back.
You're sure.
I'd like to hear you call as we get close to your talk, or you're just gonna write it on the calendar?
No, I'm
I
actually
don't
working
remember
on those
reading
once a week or
about
so.
that.
It's on my calendar already.
It's a little bit before your
I
time.
got the new calendar.
Very good.
Now, we're gonna shoot some shots of the Fabius Academy.
Okay.
With the free school system, you're entitled to grades 1 through 8. After 8th grade, you have to go someplace to do your high school. And of course, you had choices. Since you're gonna pay to go, you could go to Poppy Academy, if you could get in, you can go to the Fabius, you can go over to the Casanova Seminary. You had these choices. Of course, transportation were your responsibility.
Historical stuff. Historical stuff.
Okay.
Because we had to try to start looking at
Most of them weren't labeled.
cemetery.
Yes. Well, that's what we'd like to do, preserve the
You
information.
see the size of this plastic, that's all we use grade.
Well, it's the same company.
So I'd like to kind of make it worthwhile for people, like, if they could have a picture, if they have some of their human possession, that's good.
Now, this building still exists in the village.
You know, put it in Photoshop and so we can write it and so give it.
Where, which one?
They can give it a
Left
picture
side,
also,
it's kind of
permission
by
to use it
the
as we need to.
wall, we call it stand there.
This guy right here, right? Any guess at the year?
Very interesting. Got a lot of articles.
Before centralization, so
Yeah.
20s.
He graduated 33. So he was a year behind Dad, your dad.
Well, my dad's here, so,
And you see Ken Bryan down the bottom.
well, we got the date right there.
1930.
In the process of really doing
We're jumping around years here. I always liked Mary Brennan's picture here with her glasses.
The Union School and the Academy were the same building, right?
And I'm not sure I understand the difference between the two. I don't know if anybody can offer any.
Well, it was also a teacher's school too, wasn't it? It was union school maybe for the lower grades.
And maybe it was called Union because they had combined some of the one rooms. Union. I don't know.
I don't know.
Some of these pictures are in pretty tough shape, but it still gives us a nice detail.
High school faculty.
Charlie, where are we standing here? To take this picture.
Oh, that picture is being taken right in front of the Wilmots, facing to the east. The high school outhouse is between the principal and the woman on the And, on this far end is Walter Dunn's wife, and then there's Maud Hall, who was the wife of the, used to have the hardware. And after the principal is Mabel Packer, Mabel Phillips, and they lived where Forge lived.
Now, who's the principal?
I can't tell you, I may tell you in 3 minutes. but I can't
Okay.
tell you that.
Looks like the students might be a little crowded under those conditions.
Are the desks full to them or are they free?
Well, I think they were piled up in that side of the room.
Just to take a picture.
Yeah, right, yeah, just so their pictures is necessary.
Was he?
Where?
Right there.
Oh, Charlie, where are you
Where are
there?
you?
That's Charlie.
Found out.
How about this fellow right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Charlie.
I didn't have an necktie on, I apologize.
Still don't. Couldn't get him to wear one.
Are you going backwards?
No, we're going forward. We're finishing the phase,
Smokes.
getting near the home stretch.
Schools.
See what's first.
So where's that? Bardine, that's, that was below where Charlie lived, right? Or the crossroads near Nancy Lorraine Hoffman?
There's
Is
one
that-
Okay.
school, there's one school missing on
Bardine Road?
this. Where you see Kenyon Hollow,
Yeah.
there was one much closer to the community center.
This is
So there are two schools up in Kenyon Hollow?
There's one in Cold Settlement.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there was one in Kenyon Hollow,
Yeah.
and then there was one almost across from where that Schlick school was on the other road.
Would it be on this road?
I beg your pardon?
On this road here?
No, you're too far over.
Okay.
You see, right there was Schlick School or Stockton.
Yeah.
Where the red button is up there. But then there's one just south of the old community building, on the area bill.
Okay.
Because,
That would be in here then somewhere.
quite a ways further north than that.
Okay.
It was almost up the community center because my father taught there once.
What was it called?
Pardon?
What was it called?
The cause?
Called, the name.
That's what they're asking, I can't answer it.
Okay.
Of course, they were
But I
all,
do remember that he got hired and he was only gonna be paid if the older boys didn't throw him out. That day
The whole Dakota
arrived,
gets to.
at noon, the boys told him in the afternoon they were gonna throw him out. And of course, they were big strapping farm boys. And so, we knew he couldn't beat them all. So, when they got up out of their seats and came forward to throw him out, he grabbed the biggest one he thought he could handle and threw him up against the blackboard. And the kid hit the floor, everybody went back, sat down in their seats. At the end of the semester, my father got paid for it.
Oh, jeez.
Well, let's remember
I suppose now, I suppose now he'd be in jail.
okay, so we missed a school then, and some interesting history.
Bill, that Stockton School is right, what used to be the old Nap House up on Slick. That's just this side, just in the park. Right across from the old Nap House up there on Slick Road, on Slick Farm.
You know, we got a picture of that.
Huh?
We got a picture of
Do you? I don't have a picture now.
Yeah.
That's 17. That's Kenyon
It
Hollow.
looks like, this building looks like it still exists, probably doesn't. It's over
it. No, it's not. It's in the park.
My understanding was the county crushed most everything, or
There's a schoolhouse that looks just like this, that's like Road, as you head for Route 18. It's almost identical to that. And it would be beyond, I mean, Highland would be.
yeah. It would have been an easy building to move.
Yeah? Well, Well, it's
The
interesting.
teacher chapter did an archaeology on that foundation, and we had 3 big Agway bags full of artifacts. We stored them in the old museum. The parks threw them all out. We never had a chance to analyze them.
Kind of a rough looking bunch. These boys in front didn't get cleaned up too much.
Hey, you got a little cow, man.
That was-
You know what it's like, milking
Those
cows.
were the Abbott, near the Abbott and Crow families up in Highland Park.
Yeah.
Lucky that would have been one of their Fish's family.
Yeah.
Notice the firewood all stacked up, ready? We have some question marks here because we have no way of knowing. Izzy Woodford told us that any photos that they had of the schoolhouse when burned were burned in the school when they lived there in their fire in the 50s. So, now that's the school you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah. The foundation's there yet. It's patch of daylilies, actually, the foundation is.
Now, that building was supposed to be moved to somebody's farm as a granary. I can't remember the name of the farm.
That's what I heard too, but I can't remember the name.
There's the school.
On the right, the church is on the left and the cemetery is behind. The church is gone, the school is a house.
If you drove down there today, you wouldn't see anything that looks like this. Look at the hillside behind, how it's cleared.
Goose Hill's still
That's Edna's Field.
Looks like Edna.
Doesn't it?
Edna's field.
It's either Edna or Billy Garrett, one of the two.
Here, John.
It's Edna's Field.
Is it? Yeah.
Looks like the girls all dressed in white that day. I always wondered if they knew ahead of time whether they were going to have their picture taken.
Now, there's a Shay in that picture too, isn't there, Charlie? Or
I
what?
don't know, I never went to that school.
Do you have any idea what year that is?
Can we do it by Edna's age?
Yeah, let's see. That was born in the early 1900s.
She would have been 10 maybe.
Maybe 10, looking at the size.
Maybe 8.
8 or 10.
Teens.
Okay.
Just so like 19. This is a building that's removed.
I didn't know if it was ever moved.
It was moved across the road on the 4 corners,
Right, it's still there.
It's
It's
got
still
the
there,
blue
it's a
roof,
house now.
blue metal roof.
but it was on the opposite side of where it's at now.
It was at the
No,
road.
it's the little one in the corner.
At the road,
If you take it to him.
where they moved it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
The
trying to
four
get the
corners.
angle of the 4 corners.
4-way stop.
Centralization changed our one-room schoolhouse. We had gone through the start of the Depression. Communities needed jobs. Our governments felt that we needed to keep our rural citizens. We didn't want them moving into the cities. And one way to do that was to give a better school system to the country. And centralization seemed to be the way to go. Now maybe, Charlie, you could help us a little bit. You lived through the talk of centralization and you were a student when it was all happening. So anything you could toss in to enlighten us a little bit about what was going on, how excited you were to be able to go to school, the new school.
You're doing all right, go ahead.
So anytime you want to share with us. So this is just a little bit of history there.
Well, I remember, of course, when they centralized. Of course, I went to here in the village school, but all these centralized schools came into the centralization. Those in this area were all open. got centralized and before they built, some of the schools closed right up. And in fact, I remember the one up at Valley School up in Shottown. They contracted with a farmer up there who brought them to the school over here, back at the Baptist church in the surf and brought them this way in the winter. But on the same token, I don't think they were plowing back that either, so, I mean, it was something we had to do. The schools, there was 4 or 5 school buses when they first started to bring them into the main school on Back Street. And I think the drivers got $15 a week for driving the school buses. And it was considered a good job, and they were standing in line to get the job. And school bus garage, or I better say storage, but they were stored in the old warehouse down at canning factory, which was later the bowling alley, which is now the baseball center. So there was a big warehouse out in front of the old canning factory, which where they stored the canned peas and kept heat out all winter.
Now, what grade were you when you started into the new school? What grade were you in when you started in the new school?
Oh, I'd say 8th or first seat. Yeah, first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was pretty exciting times to switch from the Union School over to the new school. It was pretty exciting to make the switch to the new school.
Was it exciting?
Yeah.
No, not really. Because we lost our drugstore and soda fountain. There was a house that's gone now, and that was where the post office was when there was a small house. And then there were 2 houses, and then there was a drugstore roughly across from the front entrance to the previous Baptist church. And there was another house just east of that, that were torn down or gotten rid of when they built the new school. There was a house west of the Methodist church, which was not torn down for several years later. And also the post office, which was at this end of the school lot. That was there for a long time after, probably 20 years after the school had really got started.
Can you imagine the principal actually teaching a class? Guess I hit a button. See us working towards the end of the show here. Just to give you some census numbers here. You can see Fabius peaked out, the gold rush took away a lot of our residents. In the 30s, our population was probably the lowest. At the time, we were talking about centralization. And today, we've never regained our population. This was kind of surprising to me to see the actual vote. You know, this was a pretty costly thing to happen to a community, and to see 94 to 1, 95 to 1. I wonder who that one was. And 3 school motor buses. Nobody was against those. Maybe that one vote was the guy who got a school bus job. And some of the costs. And part of the vote was to close all the other schools in town.
Whoa.
And this is the first graduating class. Kind of a fancy looking class picture. Everybody's signature, including the principal.
And this was from the new
Yeah.
building. And in 1982, we held a celebration for that 50 years, and we actually buried a time capsule. Whether to be dug up in 2032.
No.
This is my dad's graduation class, and this is all a piece all put together, folds out.
Now, I asked Judy if, I'm sorry, I asked Judy if she had all the class pictures like this, and she said she doesn't have all of them. She's gonna make us a list, and we can put it in the newsletter in case somebody does have the ones we're missing.
We honored this class, and we have some photos in 1982, and it's over in the upstairs in the archives above the district office. I don't know whether you've seen them.
I haven't. Speak.
My dad worked on the school about 1930, and said he really wanted to work, because there were a lot of people, waiting for your job, and you didn't go far, and worked all winter long.
How was the pay?
I never heard him mention that.
This all tie in with the Depression and providing jobs, because a lot of schools in the area were
Yeah.
building at the same time.
It was the whole thought of keeping people living in the country, on the land, paying the taxes, providing better housing so they didn't want to take their kids into town. So we built an awful lot of schools in the country at that
And
time.
I think the only person in that class that's still alive is the second fellow in on the left, the old Reed. I made this.
He's in the middle of town. And Bob Thompson's on the far right.
Okay.
No, Bob Thompson.
Somehow this picture popped up.
Near the cemetery. Charlie's in there too.
He's the one scouting in front.
He's on the far left in the suit. He's not
He's the
scouting.
manager.
That's the end of our collection of photos.
That was good.
Thank you, Bill. Masterful job, masterful job. Well done. We've got some great